Roland? When we talk about these differences, it's very interesting for me how we are in complete denial of how we even got here. And when I often speak around the country, I tell people to understand this country in all different pieces. You use the example of a house being built. How many of you have ever had a house built from ground up? Okay, which is different from buying an existing house. So when you talk about a house being built from ground up, I've had the fortune of seeing literally in Texas, where I'm born and raised, literally cities constructed. So I saw an area, nothing there, then all of a sudden they come in, they drop power lines, sewer lines, all of those things. So all these things happen before even a foundation is laid. So let's say all those things happen, all of a sudden now you do a foundation. If you want to show a badly constructed house, you typically don't know that until after the house is being built. Because then you see the cracks in the crown molding, the cracks in the walls, because the foundation is bad. So to understand where we are today in America when it comes to sexism, when it comes to racism, when it comes to even within women, this notion of, well, I don't like you and I like you, in terms of this balance existing between black women and white women. The exact same thing happens in the LGBT community. I've done stories on the segments on this on my show where African Americans have talked about the rampant racism that exists in the LGBT movement. In the so-called equality movement, there's tons of inequality. Tons. Now, I'm not gay, but I've had brothers and sisters who are same gender loving on my show talk about the battles that they have had with other folks who are white and gay because their whiteness was more important than their gayness. So you have to understand how a house is constructed. So the cracks that we see, the reason we have the cracks in this foundation called America is because of how the problems are on our foundation. So you go back to literally how we started and see when we talk about these laws today in our country, we never say, wait a minute, when did that law get enacted and what was the root cause behind it? We were talking last night and I was talking about Governor Terry McAuliffe when he provided the voting rights for 13,000 formerly incarcerated people. That law in Virginia was put in place when a state legislator said in 1902, we are doing this to keep the darkies from voting. So Virginia was defending a law for more than 100 years where the basis was a white legislator saying, we're going to keep the darkies from voting. So what happens is we never want to ask ourselves, where did this come from? How did we even get to this point? Which explains the struggle we keep having because we want to say we live in a post-racial America, everything is great. White folks listen to hip hop, black people listen to some country music, and everything is great. Beyonce performs at the Country Music Awards, everybody is happy and wonderful until you look at the comments on the Country Music Association's website. So we have to actually look at ourselves and go, how did we get here and how does this generation change where do we go in the future? Because we're playing games if we only are having these nice cute conversations, but then we go home to largely white homes, largely black homes. We don't invite others into our home. We don't eat with other people. We don't talk with other people, but we say, oh, I'm not racist. I get along with everybody. Many of us are living lies every single day.
I'd like to talk
Killer
to you.
Mike was in my house a year ago. How many of you know who Killer Mike Render is?
I do.
Oh my God. Was it the thing?
The rest of them are going, you had dinner with a Killer Mike?
Damn right. Folks, somebody has said denial is not just a river in Egypt. In this country today, we are in deep denial about the fact that we are deeply racist. We are teaching racism in the schools on a daily basis. And if you haven't read Nathan Rutstein's book, The Racial Conditioning of Our Children, you need to get it and read it. This man knew what he was talking about. Now, somebody said this morning, he did, well, Jane came here in a sweatshirt. Yes, I came here in a sweatshirt, people, because I'm working, number one. Number two, this thing says exactly what I believe. Racism, prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Now, the problem with white people is not white innocence. Somebody this week has called it in a book, has called it white innocence. It's not white innocence, and it's not white privilege. It's white ignorance. And until white people get educated to the fact that they are not superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin, that's how long we'll have this problem. And we could, don't do that, I've got more to say. We could change this problem if we would start educating instead of indoctrinating in the schools. We are indoctrinating children instead of educating them. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duc dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. I am one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And you can't do that by teaching anti-social studies, which is what we're doing in this country today.
Now here's why that phrase white ignorance is so important. Because the problem with white privilege, and because, and I said I was a journalist, when I interviewed Maya Angelou, she says, no, you're an educator. And I went, right. Oh, okay. Really? Okay. She said,
we
no.
Are all
she
educators.
said, no, you are. I watch you. You educate every day. I was like, okay, cool, Maya. Maya Angelou said it. I'm an educator. So I live in words. Words mean something to me. So the part of the problem with white privilege is that we have been conditioned to think that privilege means you probably live in a gated community, you probably drive an Aston Martin or Rolls Royce, and then you play croquet or polo. That's what we think in terms of privilege. But what happens though is what I try to explain to people that you might be broke as hell, can't read, white in West Virginia, but the reason you have, would you say white privilege, is that you get to go to a department store and not be followed around. You might be the brokest person in the world, and I might be in the top 1%, but you get to actually do some things that I cannot do, and we're so-called free in this country. To also put it in its proper context, 20-odd Africans arrived in 1619 in Virginia. You go through this period of slavery. Go to 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, 12 years of Reconstruction, Great Compromise of 1877, takes us all the way through the Civil Rights Movement, World War I, World War II, then you go through the 13 years of the Black Freedom Movement. If you use 1970 as the marker when African Americans were technically fully free Americans, when I say fully free, meaning we could work anywhere, live anywhere, eat anywhere, but that's technically because we still had lawsuits since that point. But let's just say 1970. That means in 398 years of America, black folks have only been technically fully free Americans 47 years. Follow me here. I'm 48.
I was going to say, and how old are you?
I'll be 49 in November, which means I was born into an America where I was not born fully free. My wife and I don't have any biological children. My brother and my sisters do. That means that my nieces and nephews, the first generation of African Americans born technically fully free. I'm saying that because you must understand that, because when folks say, oh, slavery was just so long ago, but I've met individuals who were the first African Americans who went into corporate America in 1971. 89% of the electorate who voted for the president in 1972 were white. 89%. This year, it was 70%. The 2020 election will be the first time in American history less than 70% of the total electorate is white. That's important because now you begin to step back and go, wait a minute, hold up. So you're trying to tell me although slavery ended 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, which was a law only in those states that succeeded. And then, of course, it's also a lie because the 13th Amendment was passed and the word slavery still sits in the 13th Amendment if you go to the prison system. So now all of a sudden you begin to understand how all these pieces begin to fit, and then you say, oh, so now I see the Brandeis study, the average white family has $110,000 in wealth, the average black family has $5,000 in wealth, and the average Americans are able to get their wealth from home ownership. Then you understand from the Federal Housing Authority when they use the federal system to prevent black folks from owning homes and redlining, and then if you were white, you were able to get a home. White soldiers had the GI Bill after World War II, black soldiers couldn't, and then if you did have the GI Bill, you still couldn't go work in some other places. So you literally see the construction. So people go today, why is it these black folks cannot save money? It's because It was rooted in our system where we could not. And then we just saw the home foreclosure crisis where you were black, you qualify for a prime loan, but you got a subprime loan. And in the last 8 years, 53% of all black wealth was wiped out, gone due to the home foreclosure crisis. So to say, well, why are our communities looking this way? Why are most black neighborhoods looking this way? How was that black neighborhood created? Easy. A red line was drawn and it said, don't invest in it. They can't own. Don't put resources in it. And then we sit here today and go, why can't those blacks get their stuff together?